Hello and welcome. I'm Michelle Paver and we're going out live on Facebook and on YouTube for the first time live. First of all, I must apologise. It's been quite a few weeks since I've been in touch. Sorry, it's been a lot of family stuff, a lot of work stuff getting in the way, but enough excuses. We've got lots to get on with. First of all, I'll be talking about just giving you a rundown of some key things from my social media, or things that have struck me anyway. And then I'll give you a recommendation of a book and a film that maybe you'll enjoy if you're not stuck doing exams or revising exams, in which case, good luck. And then the meat of the programme. We've got masses of questions and fabulous comments from you. So there we go. Without further ado, let's get on with the social media roundup. Now, let's see, what have we got? It's a rather a scholastic kind of theme we've got going here. First of all, we've got something from Mr. Martin, who's in Norfolk. Some fabulous pictures from Year 5's reading of Wolf Brother. There's the original Wolf Brother cover. Gorgeous illustration, that. Not to be outdone, we've got St. Bridget Primary School from Glasgow, who actually went into the woods and created a Raven clan camp. And they were so busy that they didn't even mind about the midges, which is saying something in Scotland in the summer. And what else have we got? We've got in Wolverhampton, Wolverhampton Grammar. They've been busy dissecting dark matter, and they really have been doing a number on dark matter, haven't they? It's quite a strange feeling to see my text being dissected, but quite fun. I hope that's been helping you in your preparation for end-of-year exams. And then there's also I've been mentioned in a thread from Waterstones, who are talking about men not reading books written by women. Interesting one, because of course my name is a pretty feminine one, Michelle. It never occurred to me to change it. I've never quite liked my name, but I wasn't ever going to change it for a male pseudonym. Oh, and then we've got a tweet from Sweden, a really lovely reproduction, I think, an elk bone knife with microliths. Those things that you can see at sort of at the edge are little flakes of flint, which is very Torak, very Mesolithic. Very similar to the kind of knife that Vinkedin made for Torak. Then we're nipping back to school. Lisa Bishop is class teacher at an awesome primary school in Leicestershire, and they're totally hooked on Wolf Brother. So that's brilliant to know. Thank you. And now we go to Inga Vesper, who's a science journalist, and I'm afraid I've taken her away from her work for a whole day. Inga started the book at 7:30 and went on reading. So sorry about that, Inga, but I'm delighted. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And then another one from Eleni Kyriakou, who was reading Dark Matter. So creepy. Who needs sleep anyway? I quite agree. And finally, oh well, not quite finally, we've got Mark by the Sea, a lovely Arctic picture. And he's been, I think, reading Dark Matter and then listening to it. And yes, I was in the studio with Jeremy, and I think he gave a marvellous reading, really, really beautifully timed and very haunting. And finally, we've had, as you know, I've been tweeting about Costa Rica, which I visited earlier, which just drips with iguanas. They're everywhere. They're hanging from the trees. They're sort of thudding onto the roofs. We've got a lovely one from Mary, who tweeted that a few years ago she saw a girl cradling an iguana on the London Underground. The things you see on the tubes, eh? Anyway, thank you so much for that. Please keep the tweets coming at Michelle Paver. And next month, I will be featuring a selection of, well, just a selection. So now we move on to the recommendations. And it's a book and a film. The first one, yeah, these are both sort of reasonably grown up. The book is pretty grown up. It's Bel Ami by Guy de Maupassant. That's my copy. I don't know if you can see that. it's a marvelous book. It was written in 1885. It's really about Paris and how decadent it was at that time. Bel-Ami is a handsome young man who's on the make. So he's not a very moral character. Nobody's very moral in this book. And Guy de Maupassant was a realist. He wanted to write things as he saw them, which was very different, as I'm sure you can imagine from how a lot of people wrote in those days. He was also dying, and he knew it, of syphilis, because of the life he'd led. And he told it how it was. You can practically smell the decadence in this book. It's incredibly vivid writing. There's, I think, the best death scene ever. One of his friends dies, and it's quite a long scene. And it's just, Guy de Maupassant had obviously been with people who had died. And just to give you an idea of the sort of how direct the language is, this is a bit when the hero is sitting, sorry, I have to put my glasses on, is sitting by the corpse of his friend. And he's just reflecting on how weird it is that one moment this man was there and the next minute he's gone. And he's reflecting how no being ever returns. And he goes on to think millions and hundreds of millions of creatures would be born, more or less identical, with eyes, a nose, a mouth, a skull with a mind inside it. Yet the man lying in that bed would never return. So despite the pretty awful reading I just gave of that, you can see how direct the language is. And it's really well worth a read, perhaps if you need a rest from your exams. And then the film I wanted to talk about is available on DVD. It's an old one. It's called The Innocents. And it was made in 1955, so it's a black and white film. But if you like your ghost stories, this is, I think, and many other people who know about films think it's the best ghost film ever made. It's based on Henry James' classic novella, The Turn of the Screw. I think it's better, and I love Henry James. It's beautiful, and it grows on you, and the ghosts are chillingly convincing, and it doesn't pull any punches. I think some of the things that happen in that, some of the scenes are probably unfilmable now. So anyway, it's available on DVD. I do recommend it if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it, watch it again, because it bears repeated rewatchings. So there we are. That's my recommendations. Now we move on to my favourite bit, which is question time. And boy, do we have a lot. So here we go. Now, first of all, in Star Place is a question or really a comment from the Falklands, about which I know something. It's from Ms. Gallagher, who I happen to know is, I think, the IT teacher at the Falkland Islands School. And she's talking about how she doesn't think her class, she says her class do believe me that you will bother to write to them to convince them to read this book, Wolf Brother. I've heard through a source, which I'll mention, that they perhaps didn't think I would get in touch with them. And as a class, you'd like to hear from me, but they also think that it'll just be a representative of mine, like my agent or something. Well, Year 9, you should always believe your teacher, because she's absolutely right. Of course, it's going to be me talking to you. Where I'm honoured that I've got a communication from the Falkland Islands. This isn't the first time I've been contacted by your teacher, because, of course, you probably know, but other listeners may not, that my older sister, Dr. Paver, has lived in the Falklands for absolutely years. In fact, she planted an entire forest in the Falklands. I took delivery of the trees. They were sort of this high when they arrived in the post, and then she carried them out and she planted them, and they're now enormous. Anyway, she did bring a copy of your longer email, Ms. Gallagher. I'm afraid, as you probably know, there's been a lot of family stuff going on. I haven't had time to reply to it, but I am now. So it's lovely to speak to you, all of you, Year 9s. I hope you do read Wolf Brother, just to sort of show the Falklands connection. This is my mug, which my sister, Dr. Paver, gave me years ago from the Falklands, brought all the way with penguins and all the rest of it. So yeah, you're very special, and you're very lucky to live in such a beautiful country, and it's lovely to hear from you. So there we are. Moving on from the Falklands, we now go to Sophie, who's just sending me a lovely comment. Sorry, I'm trying to sort of get rid of these papers without making an awful noise. I'm just going to drop them on the floor, I think. A lovely comment, who really enjoys Torak and Ren. So thank you for that, Sophie. It means an awful lot. I'm not reading out every word of all the beautiful things that people say to me, because that's a bit big-headed. But believe me, and it would take too long, but believe me, I have read all of them. So thank you, Sophie. There's another one from James. Here we are. Now then, where is James? I just wanted to say that I've enjoyed your work for many years. And he goes on, and Spirit Walker is quite possibly my favourite. I'm always interested to hear what people's favourites are. And it was really helpful when he was working on the university assignment. So that's brilliant. And your sister's reading Gods and Warriors. So great. Excellent. Here we go. Emma, who's 10. You see, she's reading, or she was at the end of April, reading Oathbreaker. Maybe you've moved on from then. And she's suggesting that I write a guidebook about living in the wild and building shelters and things. Yeah, I mean, that would actually, if I had to describe how to do it, it would be probably about 10 volumes, because it's a lot easier to show than to actually write it down. But I've always quite enjoyed the idea of a sort of guide to Torak's world. So maybe something along those lines when I ever get time. Then we've got another Sophia, who's also been enjoying Chronicles. It was her favourite series as a child. And apparently I signed 3 of her books because her sister brought them to school. Sophia couldn't come. This was when I did an event, and I wrote, which I often do, May the Guardian Run With You. And Sophie is suggesting that I should write a quiz to find out what Guardian fits your character. I think we may have done that once, years ago, but it's not a bad idea. And yes, you're jealous of your sister, Sophia. Well, what can I say? These things happen. Now, there's one from Judy, who's a P6 teacher in Aberdeen. And you've been reading Wolf Brother, and you've organised, wonderful teacher, because you've organised a visit to a local reserve. You've done all sorts of quite intrepid things, and you were trying to make a fire to cook on, but it was too windy. A pretty tough lot. So my hat's off to you for that, and thanks for tweeting, for sending the pictures. Now then, we've got, have I covered? Yes, we're now on, yes, there is, as you can see, they really did get out into the wild. Now we've got Holly, I think, yes, Holly, who's just enjoyed both Dark Matter and Thin Air, which is fantastic. And I think you've enjoyed ghost stories since you were little. And one day hope to write a ghost story of your own. And it sounds really intriguing, Holly. You've been slowly piecing it together over the years, and gaining encouragement from my novels. Well, look, thank you for that, and good luck. And I might just say, Holly, I think you're going about it exactly the right way. Reading other people's work is well established, and quite important for ghost story writers. I mean, M.R. James himself read other people's ghost stories to sort of see how it was done. I certainly read all of M.R. James, so good luck with that. And now we move on to Martin. Again, still on the Dark Matter. Enjoyed reading that. And I'm rather pleased with this. The ending had him welling up. No joke about that. Well, I'm not laughing, I'm smiling, because I love to make grown men cry. Excellent. And now you're looking forward to reading what terrors I have lurking on Mount Kanchenjunga in Thin Air. Well, I hope you've been enjoying that, Martin. Now we've got a little clutch of comments and questions about my Bronze Age series, Gods and Warriors. Loved something from Cairo, who's been enjoying Gods and Warriors, but asks, when is the rest of the audio going to come out? Well, I've got some bad news for you, I'm afraid, Cairo. The publishers decided not to do it. So they recorded the first audio, and then they just decided to not do any more audio. I'm afraid some publishers are like that. Nothing I can do about it. Sorry. So you'll just have to get hold of a copy of the books and read them to find out what happens next. Now we have one from Valerie, another one from Valerie, who's been enjoying the Costa Rican tweets, and is just wondering whether I've investigated Ramsey Island for Bronze Age ruins. And no, I haven't, but in sort of not a million miles away from that, I went down the mines on the Great Orme for my Bronze Age research for Gods and Warriors. So thanks for that. And now we've got a post from New Zealand, all the way from New Zealand, Stephanie, who's loved my series. And she's also been doing some taxonomy homework. I'm impressed with that. What type of falcon is Echo? Well, Echo is a peregrine falcon, Falco peregrinus. There we go. Gorgeous. In the intro to this video, you will have seen me talking to one. I think that one went by the name of Eki Thump, if I remember. But yeah, so there we are. And good luck with your taxonomy homework. Sounds pretty impressive. So moving on to Heather, who also liked both series, really, Chronicles and Gods and Warriors. I wanted to know whether you plan to write any more children's books. And I was wondering whether you'd write a series set in the Iron Age. The Iron Age, I'm not so keen on. Let's just put it this way, nothing has come to my mind. But yes, I'm certainly planning to write more children's books, about which slightly more later. Moving on, we've got a couple of general ones now. This is one from Melissa, whose 9-year-old is reading Wolf Brother, and whose daughter goes to my old school, The Study, where I happened to do a talk a couple of weeks ago. And Melissa's also just wondering whether I'd do an interview for ex-lawyers who moved on, and boy, have I moved on. So yes, happy to. Melissa, the best thing is fill in the contact form on my website, and then my wonderful agent will be in touch, and we'll try to set something up in the not too distant future. I've just heard a cheer from my wonderful agent because he likes being praised, as all agents do. And now another one from Anne. I read all your books with great pleasure. And actually, Anne's been reading the Daughters of Eden trilogy, which was one of my grown-up groups of books. And the question is, will there be a prequel to that series? Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I don't think so. I haven't got any ideas about a prequel. But the question about, what, if not, what have I got planned for the future? Well, I can tell you now, Anne, that I have already written a Gothic story set in the fens, the ancient marshlands of East Anglia. And that's probably going to come up next year. And I'm really pleased with it. I think it's one of the best things I've done. And now I'm writing something else, which is a little bit under wraps for the moment, but I'm having huge fun writing it. So who knows when that'll come out. Moving on, we've got 2 questions about writing now. There's a really nice one from Alyssa, who wants to be an author when she grows up, and gets a lot of inspiration from Torak and Wren and Wolf, which is lovely. We've got some interesting questions from Alyssa. What advice do you have for future authors? I'll tackle that one first. Yeah, advice. Now, I've given this before, but I'll give it again. Read lots, which you're obviously already doing. Keep a notebook with you. Here's mine. This is the one that lives in my handbag. I've got others by my bed, by the TV, by the kettle. So if you ever get an idea or snatch of dialogue or see something that is interesting, scribble it down, because you never know when you'll need it. The other thing, I'm just going to chuck that away, is rewrite. I know I go on about this, but it bears repeating. If you write a story first time, you're never going to get it right. Nobody gets it right. Shakespeare didn't get it right first time. So you need to cross out the boring bits, change a bit, make the description better, maybe change the whole thing. And again, I've probably shown you this again, but I can show it again. This is a bit from the manuscript of wait a minute, does that? Yes, of Ghost Hunter, actually, and you can see it's all completely scribbled on and looks terrible. It's coffee stain and everything, and then I typed it up, and then there's more scribbling. You'd never think that ended up being a beautiful, clean Ghost Hunter, which then went on to win prizes and all the rest of it. But that's how writers work. That's how I work anyway. I certainly don't get it right first time. Something else, and this is important because you're young, and so you've grown up with the internet, with a mobile phone and all the rest of it. Leave them in the other room. Switch the computer off when you're writing. Try to anyway. I firmly believe that mobile phones and emails and tweeting and Snapchat are the enemies of writing, because you need to concentrate when you're writing. I did 4.5 hours work this morning writing a chapter, and I was concentrating. So I had my mobile phone on silent outside the study. My computer is 19 years old and never even heard of the internet. That's the way to concentrate. So that, I think, is really important. Just learn to just be away from all that distraction for a bit when you're writing. That will really help you get into whatever world you want to. And just getting back to, because you had 2 other really interesting questions, which I'll deal with quickly. What were some things that were easier than you expected about writing? And what were things that were harder? Well, there was nothing that was easier than I expected. Nothing at all. It's really hard writing. But doing research trips was more fun. Swimming with killer whales, that's pretty fun. What was harder? Well, everything was harder. But I think particularly beginning a book, I still find incredibly hard. So thank you for great questions, and good luck with your writing, Alyssa. Now we've got a couple from Martin, but they're effectively the same question, again on writing. Hello, Michelle, I have an idea for a ghost story. Congratulations. And I was wondering and this is a good question, how well did you need to know your characters before beginning a first draft? That is a really interesting question. I did look at my notes for this, because the standard advice is you write a biography of your character, particularly your main character, and I certainly do that. I like to know when they were born, what kind of social background, are they posh or are they not posh, what matters to them, what big events happened in their lives and when, that sort of thing. And I did that for Dark Matter and Thin Air. This is the start of my biography for Jack in Dark Matter, and it runs to several pages. And then this is the one for Stephen in Thin Air. As you can see, though, it's got quite a lot of crossings out, because the thing about biographies is it changes. You think you've got an idea of your character, but as you write, you get a better idea of them. For example, with, I don't know if you've read Thin Air, but in Thin Air, I had a bit about Stephen and his brother, and I'd sort of said attitude to Kit, that's his brother. And in my notes, I'd put, this is before I wrote it, I'd put ambivalent, a bit grateful to him for the chance to get on the expedition. Well, that changed as I was writing it, and I've written in big capitals, sibling rivalry. So it's a difficult question, but you do sort of change your attitude as you go along. But it does really help to have some idea worked out and some sort of biography. So thank you for that. That's a nice one. And now we've got a clutch of questions, a whole clutch of questions, all about Chronicles of Ancient Darkness. So first of all, this is from Neve. An interesting one. It's not about, what was your inspiration? What made you start the series? Was there an urge? Was something going on in your life to reflect into this book? Yeah, I'm sure there was. Probably not what you were thinking. I'd already written 5 grown-up historical novels, which were all love stories. And I think I'd reached the end of the road with love stories. I was in my early 40s. I was just, I don't want to write another love story. And my agent said, well, just think about anything. Just think about anything. And as I was thinking about anything and just trying to free form, I came across this story that I tried to write at university called The Jagged Land, set in North Norway in the 9th century. And there was this character, which was a wolf. And part of the story was told from his point of view, just a couple of paragraphs. And that kind of got me going. So that's how it started. I think I was ready for it because I wanted to change from love stories, and I was missing the wild. and I needed that in my life. So thank you for that, Neve. Now we move on to another one. This is Chris, yes, who's a big fan. Thank you. It has two comments. Yes, one is that, he makes the point that in every book in the series, one of the Soul Eaters tries to separate Wolf from Torak and Ren. Torak from Wolf and Ren. And it's through their companionship that Torak overcomes this. Is it through their companionship? Absolutely right, it is. And I've actually saw this when I was writing the books as a sort of golden thread. That's how I visualized it. There's a lot of darkness in these books, but the sort of golden thread running through it is the relationship between Torak and Ren and Wolf, and that's what kind of, I hope, lightens the darkness. And then the second thing, Chris really liked the relationship between Ren and Finkedin, the sort of father-daughter. And do you think Ren would have been able to accomplish her goals without his support and guidance? Absolutely not. And I'll go further. I mean, Torak wouldn't either. I always thought of Finkedin as a sort of moral fulcrum, the pivot of Torak's world. There's got to be a grown-up who knows what's what, and Finkedin is it. So thank you for that. Now we move to Puck. Yes, we've got, and don't worry, Puck. I mean, I'm mentioning one of your questions here, and we'll deal with the others a little bit later. First of all, she says she's using bad spelling. No, you're not. You're Dutch, and your English is amazing. So well done. Now you've got a few questions in this one. Does it just happen to you where you go on a research trip that's going to help with another, or do you just sort of think up somewhere to go? Or do you choose, basically? And these research trips are expensive. It's expensive going to the Arctic. So I do choose very carefully where I'm going. I sort of think, well, what do I need? Like, for example, with Soul Eater, well, okay, I need to go to far north. I need polar bears. I need ice. And then I choose where to go and hope I'll find it. But what just happens is that things happen unexpectedly on the research trips. Like I went to Greenland, and on the Greenland ice sheet at the edge for in fact, I was researching Spirit Walker at the time. There was black ice because there was lots of ground up little bits of stone. And I remember thinking, oh, this is going to make a great climax for Soul Eater. I just had this vision of black ice, white bears, red blood, and then Ren's red hair. And that gave me the whole climax for Soul Eater. Not in all the details, but that was the surprise. So yeah, that's how it works. Another question, why does being with wolves help you for inspiration for Wolf Brother? Again, it's just because animals always give you surprises. They're all individuals. Just to give you an example, I saw, one of the cubs at the time, or the wolves, who was black and beautiful black fur, the inspiration for dark fur. She was cleaning her teeth, her jaws, by running them over a piece of bramble of blackberry, with thorns on. And I didn't know wolves did that, and not all wolves do, but that one did. So there we are. You get surprises from doing research, and wolves are endlessly fascinating. We'll come back to you, Puck, in a little while, but now we move on to one from Matt, who is a teacher, year 5 at Wybenbury, I hope I've pronounced that, Delves Primary School, and they're using Wolf Brother as a topic to read, and apparently I've inspired some writing, which is fantastic. Now, you've asked me, Matt, to read the chapters that they've written, and I'm afraid I haven't, partly because I just haven't had time, and also because I get a lot of requests to read a lot and comment on a lot of work. And if I did, especially on the internet, I just open the floodgates, and I just don't have the time. But I'll say this, and perhaps you could pass it on. I want to congratulate those of you who've posted your chapters for me to read, because you've actually done what a lot of would-be writers haven't got the courage to do, which is to show their work to a published writer. It's a scary thing to do. I remember, because I was learning to write for years. That's a scary thing to do. So you've already done something that shows you're very much on the right track, because you're inviting comments and criticism. I'm sorry I don't have the time to do it, but you're already brave, and I salute you as fellow writers. Now, moving on, we've got a little clutch about the film of Wolf Brother from Daniele in Italy. And he's just mentioning that he's enjoyed the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness and wanted to know if we make a movie, if there ever is a deal, where would you be able to find the date of the castings? Because you'd love to act in them. Well, you'd be able to certainly find it on my website, michellepaver.com, if we ever get that far. And if we ever do get a deal, and if it's ever made, you'll hear it on my website. Yeah, there we are. So thank you. Again, Phoebe, this is lovely. Phoebe's father read Chronicles to her when she was younger. You've got a wonderful father. That's a marvellous thing to do. I actually wrote those books hoping that people would read them aloud. Not all the time, but sometimes. So that's lovely. And you still continue to read them. So I'm so glad you still feel a connection to them. Will films ever be made, or maybe more books? I'll talk about the more books a little bit later. Films, I'll park that because Michael Molden has also asked the same question. He's actually also just wondering if high school English classes might use my series as part of their curriculum. Well, they do, Michael. You can, as you've probably seen from all the wonderful pictures that fabulous teachers have been posting. But you've also thought of, have I ever thought of getting this series as a feature film? Well, it wouldn't be up to me because it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, I should think. But yes, just to answer that question about films, as regular watchers will know, we've had deals in the past and then they go into development and then they don't happen. That's partly because, it's hard to work with wolves. You'd probably have to make Wolf computer generated or something to make him work properly. So there's nothing as yet. So don't hold your breath, but it'll happen at some stage, I'm sure, and then you'll see it on my website. Now, here's an interesting one from Aaron in grade 4, whose favourite book of the series is Outcast because it's so sad. He obviously likes sad books. Yes, I did give Torak a very miserable time in Outcast, didn't I? Especially his birthday, I remember. And the question is, will I write any more books that are sad like Outcast? I think inevitably, I'm always putting my characters through very hard times. That's what I do, I'm afraid. I just find it most interesting when they're having a miserable time. So yes, thank you for that. Now we have, we've already had the question of the sequel to Wolf Brother raised a few times. Something in Russian from Artyom, I think. Здравствуйте, Artyom. Простите, я только немножко говорю по-русски. So in fact, I don't speak any Russian. But the question is, why was this book never filmed? Well, again, because it's very expensive and who knows. But maybe it will be in the future. And I think, yes, will there be a sequel? I'm not trying to dodge it. I just haven't read that bit. I think here we have Puck from the Netherlands again. She also wants to know, are you going to write a new book of the series Torak and Wolf? I really love the series. I hope you'll write a new book. She gives an example. And then there's about 10 minutes later, Puck added another one saying, oh, I've just realized that, the title's different in Holland. But don't worry, Puck. I do know that the title's different. I have a copy of all my overseas books. That's the cover of Torak and Wolf. So I wasn't confused. Is there going to be a sequel? Well, always I've said no, it's going to be just 6 books and the story has a shape and it ended with Ghost Hunter. The last few years I've begun to think, well, if I get a really good idea, I would like to go back to that world because Torak and Ren and Wolf haven't left me. So if I get a good idea, yeah, I'd write it like a shot. Watch this space. So now we are drawing to a close, but we've got a group of sort of quite lengthy questions, which are lovely. There's one which is quite a long comment from Leah, who's actually writing her own series set in ancient Rome. or a Roman-inspired world, taking a bit of inspiration from Wolf Brother, because one of your characters speaks wolf, as it were. And you've asked me about, I'm a patron of the UK Wolf Conservation Trust. Is that how I got to sit with the Torak the wolf and his siblings when they were cubs? Yes. Yes, there are those pictures. Oh, I was getting, yes. Oh, that's Torak when he was a baby. He was absolutely too cute for words. Yes, the UK Wolf Trust, as some of you may know, is closing its doors to the public this summer, quite understandably. It's had a long and lovely run, and I'm sorry that it will be doing so, but I can understand completely. And may the wolves have an enjoyable retirement. They're very lucky wolves. We have another one from Leah, just saying, in all the books. Oh yes, at the end. Oh, by the way, Leah, I mean, I quite understand. Feel free to, be inspired by Wolf Brother, and quite right to base your character on the legend of Romulus and Remus, who also had links with a wolf. At the end, she's asking about Torak's father's name. Did I ever come up with his real name, or did I just sort of not think about it? Oh, I did think about it. I did come up with his name, but I've never written it down, and I won't ever reveal it, because I think it would feel really odd to reveal it now after 6 books. So yeah, that answers that one. And now I don't know how to pronounce your name, Tabia. This is a lovely one. It's quite long, so obviously I won't read it all out aloud. But you've just read Dark Matter, and you've actually read most of my books, and you're talking about how in Chronicles as well, there are quite important, large themes that emerge. How one views reality, life, death, that sort of thing. And as you say, massively complex philosophical questions arise. And you go on, and then towards the end, you're saying, I didn't plan on asking a question, but writing this, I started to wonder, is it a conscious process that you set out to address these huge philosophical and existential questions? Or is it just your view of the world shining through in your stories? And that's a fascinating one. It's sort of often not conscious, but it becomes conscious as you're writing. I did learn very early on not to decide on a theme and then sort of stick to it, because sometimes what you think is the theme isn't. As you're writing the story, you start to realize what the theme is. And that's useful. And then you can start to focus, and the symbols start to come, and you realize what images will work and how to focus the story. But it's often a sort of unplanned thing. And then afterwards, you realize, oh, well, that's what I was concerned about. I like when I mentioned in answer to another question that I was missing the wild in my life, and I wanted a connection with it. Well, that's why I ended up writing Wolf Brother. But I didn't know it consciously at the time, but I became aware of it as I was writing. So, yeah, thank you for that. It's a really interesting question that I had to think about quite a lot before cobbling together an answer. But that's the truth. That's how writing happens, for me anyway. And finally, we have a question, or several questions, 3 questions from Elias in Sweden. And the first one, again, these are quite long, so I won't read the whole thing, but first one's about bears and how there is this veneration and respect for bears in the Sami culture, in the Ainu people. And the question is, did I, include that awful magic in Soul Eater? Did that have any relation to the sort of Arctic practices? And yes, it very much did. And I never had a chance to deal with bears as much as I wanted to, culturally in Chronicles. For instance, I'm not sure that I ever mentioned that there is no bear clan. There never was a bear clan, because the bear is so incredibly powerful that would have been unfair to all the other clans. So there's a lot more I could do with bear magic in those books. The second question is, this is an easy, quick one. Is there a description of the Lynx clan's clan tattoo somewhere in the books? And from a quick check of my continuity notes, no, there isn't. I mentioned what the Lynx clan looks like, but there isn't. So I don't think you're going to find one. Feel free, anybody, to correct me on that, because I haven't actually trawled through all the books. I'll come back to the third question as the last question, because it's a nice question. But just skating quickly on, Elias, the bonus question, he mentions that I grew up in Malawi, and the question is, was it strange to move to England where all animals and plants and birds and animals are different? For me, it wasn't, Elias, because I moved when I was very small. I was not even 3 when I moved, so I only have very few memories of Africa. Although we did go back often, it was much harder for my father, who was much older. And I understand you may be moving. He's not sure yet, and that's why you're concerned about that. We'll come back to that. You also just add a recommendation, for which many thanks. A book about a boy growing up in the Mesolithic, which is Torax period. The book's called Mesolith by Ben Haggerty and Adam Brockbank. I don't know that one, but thank you for mentioning it, Elias. But let's get back to your third question, because that's the one I find most interesting, because you're asking for depictions of reindeer. Do I know of any? Because you quite like the idea of a tattoo. And I find this touching. You have roots in the far north of Sweden, and you'd like to get a tattoo of a reindeer to honour that part of me, especially since I may be moving to a foreign country where the Swedish nature and animals I'm used to won't exist. So I did a bit of research on this, Elias, and I didn't have to look far, because when I was writing Wolf Brother, or rather when I was thinking about writing Wolf Brother, I just talked to my wonderful agent, and I said, we've just talking about this idea of a Stone Age boy, and he was very keen on it, and he gave me a present. He went to a secondhand bookshop and he gave me a book, which is quite a sort of academic treatise, called, let's just see if I can get it on. I don't know, I'm not doing it very well. Anyway, it's called A Chorological Study of North European Rock Art, and it's by a Swedish academic called Mats P. Malmer, Malmer. And it's great. And it was very, very inspiring, not least. Let me see if I can get that up so you can see it. Can you see? There's a hand there. It's quite, with sort of lines of power emanating from the middle finger. Those of you who've read Wolf Brother will remember, I think there's a chapter heading when Torak goes down before he goes down into the cave. There's a carving of a hand with lines of power. That's where I got it from. But to answer your question, Elias, there are representations of reindeer in this book. And I'll give you some, well, again, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's one there. There we are. Yeah, you can see a few. You might be able to get hold of a copy of this book. It might be available on Amazon. It's called A Chorological, don't know what that means, Study of North European Rock Art by Mats P. Malmer. But I also, some of the names you can Google. In your country, you've got, and in Norway, you've got fabulous rock art. The ones I looked at were Leiknes and Alta, and what was the other one? Glösa. Forgive my pronunciation. There's one at Böle, which is definitely a reindeer. I know what you mean. You can get confused with the different deer, but the reindeer have the antlers pointing up, and then the little one in front for scraping away the lichen. So I think if you Google Scandinavian rock art and some of those place names, Alta, Böle, Glösa, Leiknes, you'll probably find something that will inspire you. But I really hope you do. I think it's a lovely idea, but I wouldn't worry, even if you end up moving. It sounds like you've got a very strong connection with Swedish nature. That's not surprising, because it's a gorgeous country. So I think you will carry it with you wherever you go, in your heart. But that's a lovely one to end on. So thank you for that, Elias. I think that's all I've got time for now. But thank you for all your truly great questions and comments. As I said, I haven't read out every single word of what you've said about my books, partly because it would be a bit big-headed of me, I think. But I have read them, believe me, every word, and they are hugely encouraging. and helping me to write. So thank you. Please keep them coming. As I think I've mentioned before, I don't respond to posts myself because I'm just too busy and I don't have email, too busy writing. But so the best way to keep in contact with me is to go to my website, michellepaver.com, and click on the Ask button and then fill in the form. And that way it will reach me, and it will feature on the next edition of Michelle Paver Live. You can also keep up to date with me on Twitter at Michelle Paver, and here on Facebook. So that's all I've got time for. So all it remains for me to say is goodbye until next time, and happy reading.